Soil texture is an important property of the soil, referring to the proportion of sand, silt, and clay present in the fine fraction of the soil. It's important because it can determine the soil water retention, aeration, drainage, and the natural fertility of the soil. There are a couple different ways of measuring the soil texture, including the hydrometer method, the pipette method, and hand texturing. Hand texturing is a relatively quick and effective way to measure soil texture. However, it requires frequent calibration or practice with soils of a known texture. In front of me, I have two different soil samples of unknown texture, soil sample A and soil sample B, and we're going to be working through the Canadian Soil Texture Determination Key and comparing our results to the Canadian Soil Textural Triangle. The first step on the soil determination key is the graininess test. So we simply take our sample, put it in our hands, and rub between our forefinger and thumb and feel for individual grains. If there's more than 50% sand in the sample, we move to the left side of the key, and if there's less than 50% sand in the sample, we move to the right side of the key. The next step is the moist cast test. So for this, we take some of our soil sample and we wet it with water. Then we squeeze it into a ball or a cast with our fist and roll it back and forth between our hands. Depending on how well it sticks together, we can narrow down our choices of soil texture classes. The better it sticks together, the more clay there is present in the sample. The next and final step is the worm test. So we take our soil cast and roll it between our hands, and depending on how thin we can get our soil cast or soil worm, we can determine which soil texture class we have. Knowing the soil texture is an important step for determining how to manage for your end land use. For example, a loamy soil with equal proportions of sand, silt, and clay is ideal for plant growth because it has good drainage, good moisture retention, and good natural nutrient holding capacity. All right, so let's start with soil A. So we're just doing the graininess test here. And we can feel that there's less than 50% sand in the sample. So we need a little bit more soil to perform the moist cast test. All right, so we have our cast. When we roll it between our hands, we can see that it's quite sticky and it has a very strong cast. Then the next step is the worm test. So we can try to roll it out here. Get a little bit more soil. Right, and we have quite a long, skinny worm here. Some additional considerations for determining the soil texture are the stickiness tests. You can take your soil sample and compress it between your fingers, and then when you release, you can see how much it stretches and how much sticks to your fingers. So the stickier a soil is, the more montmorillonite clay there is present. There's also the soapiness test. You can rub the sample between your fingers like this to feel for silt, which will have a slick or soapy feel to it. So the more slick and soapy, the more silt there is present in your sample. Okay, that one's good. All right, and now we can perform the same test with our other soil, unknown B. Just rub it between your fingers. And this one has more than 50% sand. It's quite grainy. Now to perform the moist cast test, we need a little bit more soil and then to add water to our sample. Now we have our cast, and when we roll it between our palms, we can see that it's not very stable, kind of falls apart. So we have a weak cast. And now we can do the worm test. So when we roll it out, we're not able to get a very thick worm, and we have a worm greater than 3 millimeters in diameter. So this means we have a sandy loam here. So some additional considerations when you're determining your soil texture are the stickiness test. So you can compress your soil sample between your fingers, and when you pull it apart, see how much it sticks to your fingers and how much it stretches. So the more stretchy and sticky your soil is, the more morellinate clay there is present. There's also the soapiness test. You can just rub the sample between your fingers, and the more silt there is present in the soil, the more soapy or slick the sample will feel, as opposed to clay, which will be sticky, and sand, which will be grainy. Soil A is a clay loam soil, meaning it has high water holding capacity, poor drainage, poor aeration, and good nutrient holding capacity. Soil B is a sandy loam, meaning it has good aeration, good drainage, and low nutrient holding capacity.